Tonight, we're going to be answering the question, is socialism on the rise in America? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. President Trump and the Republicans have spent an awful lot of time trying to convince America that socialism is growing and that we should be concerned. Maybe you remember the last State of the Union when President Trump said, the United States will never be a socialist nation. Does anybody remember that? It was pretty profound in my mind when he said it. It was something that the Republicans found very important to be said that day. So what we want to look at tonight is this just a bunch of rhetoric designed to get the base ginned up and to make us fearful? Or is this for real? First, we need to define what we mean by the word socialism. What do we mean when we use the word socialism? In 2018, Gallup did a survey to ask Americans, what is your understanding of the term socialism? That's the question that they asked. How do you understand it? There was a tie for the number one answer. First, so there's two answers for number one, was no opinion. I got no opinion, all right? Second, equally, it was number one as well, was equality. Equal standing for everybody, all equal in rights, equal in distribution. Both of those were at 23%. 23% said no opinion or basically equality. The second place answer was government ownership or control. Government ownership of utilities. Everything controlled by the government. State control of business. It had 17% of the answers. So that's how Americans are defining the term. But how does the dictionary define it? Well, let's go to Merriam and Webster and see what they have to say. Socialism. Number one, economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of the goods. There's really four definitions that we have here. I'm not going to belabor too long. I'll give you one more definition. 2A is this: a system of society or group living in which there is no private property. We'll come back to the other two maybe in a bit. All right, so that's how Merriam and Webster are defining it. But those definitions, as we've noticed, they don't say a whole lot about equality, do they? Not a whole lot about equality. We're really just talking about no property rights and a strong central government. That's what they're really talking about there. Here's what we find on the Communist Party USA's website. You ever been there before? We're going there today. All right? This is what they say about socialism, and this will really help clarify it for us. Socialism, with the active participation of millions, will usher in a new era. The great wealth of the U.S. will for the first time be used to benefit all people. Socialism is not a dream, but rather a necessity to improve working class people's lives and ensure the survival of developed human civilization. In constant battles over issues large and small, the working class learns that more fundamental changes are necessary to have a truly humane society. The struggles for the immediate demand and reforms needed by working people today are essentially steps towards our ultimate goal of the revolutionary transformation of society and economy. Let me just take a time out right there. This is something, as I've been studying this, that comes up a lot. This word, struggle. This is a favorite word of socialists. Here's something to pay attention to. I believe that this word can really sum up the ideas of socialism. Struggle. And we'll see this coming up a lot tonight. On their website, under the Communist Party USA's website, I found the word economy 32 times. And this is on the one page that's all about socialism and their programs and that sort of thing. We found the word economy 32 times. The word capitalism 66 times. Socialism, who wants to take a guess? How many times we find the word socialism on their programs About Us page?
132.
116. That was a pretty good guess. All right. Now, how many times do we find the word struggle? Somebody take a guess. 200? Give me another one.
400.
400. Can I hear a 500? No, it's not 500. It was 225 times. We have the word economy 32, capitalism 66, socialism 116, struggle doubles that at 225 times. They have a lot to say about struggling. And you might be wondering why, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. They continue to say that the struggles are used to move the country towards socialism and then communism. They admit that. So they say the struggles for the immediate demands and reforms needed by the working people today are essentially towards our ultimate goal of revolutionary transformation of society and the economy towards socialism and then communism, an even higher stage of social and economic development. That's what communism is. It's an even higher level of economic development. They admit that socialism is a stepping stone to communism. Okay, so now let's look at the Democratic Socialists of America. This is the Bernie Sanders of the country. To achieve a more just society, many structures of our government and economy must be radically transformed through greater economic and social democracy so that ordinary Americans can participate in many decisions that affect our lives. Democracy and socialism go hand in hand. All over the world, wherever the idea of democracy has taken root, the vision of socialism has taken root as well. Everywhere but in the United States. Because of this, many false ideas about socialism have developed in the U.S. So they're saying something a little bit different, aren't they? They believe that many Americans have a false idea of true socialism. They're saying something different than the Communist Party of the U.S. They go on to say, Democratic Socialists do not want to create an all-powerful government bureaucracy. That was in quotes. Quote, Democratic Socialists do not want to create an all-powerful government bureaucracy. End quote. And, I quote, Democratic Socialists have long rejected the belief that the whole economy should be centrally planned. Unquote. Those are their words from their website. So they're saying Democratic Socialism is not about having a centrally planned government. Okay? Can you see the problem? It looks like we can't agree on a definition. We're not agreeing here. The dictionary definition talks about central planning by the state. The Democratic Socialists are saying that they don't want centralized planning. That's what they say. In 1949, Gallup did the same poll, and they found that 34% of Americans agreed with the dictionary definition of socialism. So you go back 60 years, the majority of Americans got the definition right. There's been a cultural shift in the public's perception of socialism over the last 60 years. Less people believe that it's about the abolition of private property with a centralized government and more about equality and social services. So there's this shift going on in our culture. So which is it? If I asked you, what is Christianity? How would you respond? Somebody give me an answer. What is Christianity? Put you on the spot.
Following Jesus.
Following Jesus. Okay, there's a nice, happy definition of Christianity. Okay, so following Jesus. Let me add a little bit to that, Phil. It's a belief where we are all sinners and that Christ died on the cross for our sins, and if we accept him as our Savior, then we will be saved. That kind of works. What if someone else might answer, Christianity is the belief that God loves everyone, and as long as you try to do good things, God will let you into heaven. How's that for an answer?
That's false.
Oh. Okay. So you don't buy that answer.
No, because if you read the Bible, God destroyed the whole world with a flood because of sin, and he sent Jesus eventually because of sin, so that's not the story of the Bible.
So you can't have Christianity without talking about sin. That's your point. Good. So when we have two opposing views of Christianity, how can we know which one is true? We need to go to the source, and the source is the Bible. If we have varying views of socialism, we need to go to the source. We've got to go to the source. And the source is, I have it right here, the Communist Manifesto. So that's where we're going to go here briefly to see what the source has to say about what he created. The Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in 1848. So on page 9 of the Communist Manifesto, he says this, Karl Marx, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Free man, there's that word again, struggles. That's all of human history is about struggling. Free man and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman. In a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another. So these are Marx's words. Oppression, struggling. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, bourgeoisie and proletariat. The bourgeoisie are the capitalists. They are the oppressors. They are oppressing the proletariat. Let's go to page 22. He says the communists are distinguished from other working class parties only by this. In the national struggles of the proletarians of the different countries, they point out and bring to the front the common interest of the entire proletariat, independently of all nationality. Independent of all nationality, he says. They always and everywhere represent the interests of the movement as a whole. So he's bypassing nationalities. So he's abolishing nations. Let's continue on to page 23. In this sense, the theory of communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property. So you like your house? Give it up. You like your business? Give it up. There's no such thing. Let's flip over to page 26. Abolition of the family, says Marx. Even the most radical flare-up at this infamous proposal of the communists. On what foundation is the present family? The bourgeois family based? Let me read that again. On what foundation is the present family, the bourgeois family, based? On capital, on private gain. The bourgeois family will vanish as a matter of course when its complement vanishes. And both will vanish with the vanishing of capital. So now he's abolishing your family. Good riddance. This stinks. Let's continue on here to page 29. He says, communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality, instead of constituting them on a new basic. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience. So you like your religion? Abolished! It's gone now too. You like eternal truths? Abolished! Those are gone too. Instead, well, let's move on. The communist revolution is the most radical rupture with traditional property relations. No wonder that its development involves the most radical rupture with traditional ideas. They're parting ways with any kind of tradition. All right, and let's finish with page 30. We see that one of his core tenets is a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. Do we have that here in America? We bought into that. We have that. And a strong centralized government. He says, the proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degrees all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state. So that's the way that he's defining socialism. A strong centralized government. Okay. But you might say, wait, you've played a nasty trick on me. You just read from the Communist Manifesto, not the Socialist Manifesto. So maybe those two things are different. Okay, you got me. All right? You caught me. So let's play a little game here. Let's match the word to its definition. Here on this sheet, I have 3 definitions. We have socialism, we have Marxism, and we have communism. I want to give you a definition, and you tell me which word it represents. Okay, communism, Marxism, or socialism. And we'll see how well you all do here tonight. Are you ready? Here we go. All right, I'm going to pick one here. A system in which goods are owned in common and are available to all as needed. Raise your hand.
Communism.
Oh, you got it right. Good job. He teaches this stuff, so that's not fair. Okay, let's try another one. The political, economic, and social principles and policies advocated by Marx. I guess I just gave it away there. Good job, Phil. You got it right. Okay, that one doesn't work. Okay, the word's in there. Okay, let's try another one. A system or condition of society in which the means of production are owned and controlled by the state.
Socialism.
You got it right, Dad. Okay, let's try another one. Any various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of means of production and distribution of goods. You say communism? Socialism? Communism? Anybody else?
All the above.
Yeah, maybe. That one actually was socialism. So, Phil, you got it right. Okay. A theory advocating elimination of private property.
That's Marxism.
Marxism? Communism? Anybody else? Dallas, what do you say?
Communism.
Okay. Anybody else? Beth, what do you got?
Marxism.
It was communism. But as you can see, these are all really bleeding together, aren't they? They're really all saying the same thing. There's not a whole lot of difference here. But I think I'm going to point out one of them. Let's see. Okay. So let me point out just one. Socialism, definition 3. A stage of society in Marxist theory transitional between capitalism and communism, and distinguished by unequal distribution of goods and pay according to work done. This one says that socialism is in the transitional stage between capitalism and communism. So there's a minor detail there, right? It's a stepping stone to communism. Vladimir Lenin said, the goal of socialism is communism. The goal of socialism is communism, and he should know, because he created the USSR, standing for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which was a communist government. And it has socialist in the name. All right, so hopefully we've kind of established what we're talking about when we're talking about socialism. So now let's move on to, is socialism on the rise in America? In 2016, there were 7,000 Democratic Socialist members. Just 7,000 in 2016. Do we think it's gone up or down since then? You say up. Okay. All right. In 2020, there are 70,000 members. So it's gone up by 10 times the amount in 4 years. Axios reported that there were over 40 socialists that won their primary elections in 2018. We almost had a Democratic Socialist as a Democratic nominee for the presidency this year. Real close, weren't we? Pretty close. The 2018 Gallup poll shows that 57% of Democrats, so we're talking about Democrats here, 57% of them view socialism positively. 57%. What do we think? How do they view capitalism? They're at 47% viewing it positively. Isn't that wild? They view socialism more positively by 10 points than capitalism. That should tell us something. Victims of communism, they do a poll year after year. So the 2019 poll says this: likelihood of voting for a political candidate who identifies as a socialist. I'm going to be giving you all of the millennials and their answers. If you want to check out all their other answers, you'll see that the older generations, as you would imagine, they aren't as keen on socialism. But we're going to just be talking about the millennials, which is my generation, all right? So we can get an idea for where the country's going, okay? So likelihood of voting for a political candidate who identifies as a socialist. Millennials say 20%, extremely likely. So a fifth of millennials are extremely likely. 50%, so half, somewhat likely. 30%, not likely at all. Should the government provide a universal basic income where every citizen receives a monthly stipend from the government? Millennials say, 24% say don't know. They don't know. 40% say no. 36% say yes. UBI. All right. 36%. Should all private property be abolished? Millennials say 21%. They don't know. 58% say no. 22% say yes. A fifth of millennials think that a private property should be abolished. That's making my hair stand up on my arm. Okay? All right. Should all higher education in America be free? You say?
No.
Phil's going back to college. Millennials say, 19% say don't know. They don't know. 36% say no way. 45%, almost half, say yes. 45% want the free college. Free speech on college campuses. Seems like a good idea to me. Millennials answered this way. 46% want to protect free speech. That's good. Woohoo! 46%. 28% want to exclude what is considered hate speech. So almost 30% are for hate speech laws. Should America's borders be, millennials say, 24%, I don't know what they should be. 35% say closed. 35% of millennials say they should be closed. 40% say open. According to a 2006 study done by two researchers from Harvard and George Mason University, they found that 26% of professors in sociology identified as being Marxist. They identify themselves as being Marxist. A quarter of them. How many of them aren't saying whether they are or not? That'd be an interesting question. So a quarter of them claim to be Marxist. So I wonder what, and that was in 2006, I wonder what that number is today, 14 years later. What did Vladimir Lenin say? Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. Give them 4 years to sow the seed. What kinds of seeds were sown in Lenin's utopian society? 60 million people dead, decades of oppressed people, destruction. I wonder what kinds of seeds are being currently sown in the minds of our young people today. What will those seeds grow into? In Lenin's utopia, it grew into 60 million people dead. 60 million. There's 12 million people living in the whole state of Ohio. 12 million. Times that by 6, and that's the amount of people that died in the Soviet Union because of these ideas. That's mind-blowing. What is the fruit of socialism throughout history? Why is it that the fruit of socialism throughout history always ends in destruction? You want to end oppression, don't you? We need to allow a central government to fix things for us. It sounds very compassionate, doesn't it? It sounds very compassionate. But the system created gives too much power to too few people. You're giving too much power to too few people. Our founding fathers had a bleak view of human nature, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Therefore, they created a system of checks and balances where the central government had very little power. Just 3 things they get to do. Protect our God-given inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Notice that I said pursuit of happiness, not that they are to provide for your happiness. Right? Now, I want to talk about China's journey to communism, and maybe there's something that we can learn as we go on this journey into history. Okay? In 1963, Mao launched the socialist education movement, which is regarded as a precursor of the Cultural Revolution. Launching the Cultural Revolution in May 1966, Mao called on young people to bombard the headquarters and proclaimed that to rebel is justified. In order to eliminate his rivals within the CPC and in schools, factories, and government institutions, Mao charged that bourgeoisie elements had infiltrated the government and society with the aim of restoring capitalism. He insisted that revisionists be removed through violent class struggle. There's that word again. To which China's youth, as well as urban workers, responded by forming Red Guards and rebel groups. The Red Guards. And we'll be talking about them around the country. They began to hold struggle sessions regularly and grab power from local governments and CPC branches. So they start these struggle sessions around the country, and they start taking over local governments. Any of this sounding familiar? Okay. Students everywhere began to revolt against their respective schools' party establishment. Classes were promptly canceled in Beijing, primary and secondary schools, followed by a decision in June 13 to expand the class suspension nationwide. So they shut down the schools nationwide. Mao's praise for rebellion encouraged the actions of the Red Guards. As the Red Guards held rallies, Lin Biao called for the destruction of the 4 olds. The 4 olds, he called them. What were they? Namely, old customs, culture, habits, and ideas. Get ready for this. They renamed city streets, places, and even people. They renamed themselves. Millions of babies were born with revolutionary-sounding names during this period. Other aspects of Red Guard activities were more destructive, particularly in the realms of culture and religion. Various historical sites throughout the country were destroyed. Does that sound familiar? Okay. Various historical sites were destroyed. Libraries full of historical and foreign texts were destroyed. Books were burned. Temples, churches, mosques, monasteries, and cemeteries were closed down and sometimes converted to other uses. Clergy were arrested and sent to camps. You see, socialism is not about making the current system better. That's not what it's about. It's about tearing down the current system to make room for a new one. That's what it's about, getting rid of the old to make way for the new. Why is this? Marx's idea of socialism is incompatible with American and biblical values. And let's go back to what he says on page 31 of the Communist Manifesto. This is going to show us why these ideas are incompatible with our current society. Of course, in the beginning, this cannot be effected except by means of despotic inroads on the rights of property. He's talking about taking over private property by the central government. He says it can't be done without the means of despotic inroads on the rights of property. And I had to look up that word, but that is rule with absolute power, typically cruel or oppressive or tyrannical. So the government has to come in and take your stuff. How are we going to have a centralized government that with no private property unless we take away your property? And so that creates a lot of unrest and a huge struggle that ensues. And so that's what we always see whenever communism takes over. There's a revolution. You have to get rid of the old to make way for the new. By means of measures, therefore, which appear economically insufficient and untenable, but which, in the course of the movement, outstrip themselves, necessitate further inroads upon the old social order, and are unavoidable as a means of entirely revolutionizing the mode of production. This is unavoidable. It has to happen. And this is why. He says political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing the other. That's all that political power is. It's one class of people oppressing another. Is that what we believe as Americans? Is that all that political power is? Is one class of people oppressing another? Well, we learned 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, that God is sovereign and he governs over all of his creation. And he has, in his mind, decided that he's going to delegate some of his power to civil governments. This is God's idea. He's giving his power, his authority to civil governments. Romans 13, 1 through 10, or I'm not sure what the verse is, I shortened it. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except which God has established. God establishes governments. But in Marx's mind, there is no God. So we got to create a government without God. What's that going to look like? Let's also look at the preamble of the U.S. Constitution to see how our founding fathers viewed political power. It says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." The government has a job. Political power is for more than just oppressing your opponents. It's actually for the welfare of the people that you take care of, that you provide for, that you protect. And let's just point out a couple things. It promotes the general welfare, protects the people. But note it doesn't say that it provides for the general welfare. It promotes it. That's something very different, isn't it? Promoting something versus providing something. Victims of communism, we're going back to that website, asked this on their survey. Which document better guarantees freedom and equality for all? The Declaration of Independence or the Communist Manifesto? Which one better provides for its people? Millennials answered this way. 24% said, don't know. 57% said the Declaration of Independence. 19% said the Communist Manifesto. 1/5 of millennials said that, where's it at? This book here guarantees freedom and equality for all better than our own Constitution. 1/5. That's really interesting and important when thinking about this. Which one do you choose? This or our own Constitution? I don't think it's this for me. I hope that I've clarified what socialism is and that we shouldn't change the dictionary definition. Instead, we need to educate others about the true meaning of socialism. I hope I've made a solid case that it is increasing in popularity in the U.S. and that this should concern us. And I want to wrap up once again with Alexander Solzhenitsyn. In the introduction of his book, he says this. This is a guy who's lived through socialism. He's lived through communism. He's written about it. He was in a concentration camp for 8 years. He actually believed in socialism until it turned its ugly head on him and devoured him. And when he got out of that concentration camp, he was a new human being. This is what he says. He says, if it were possible for any nation to fathom another people's bitter experience through a book, how much easier its future fate would become, and how many calamities and mistakes it could avoid. But it is very difficult. There always is this fallacious belief, it would not be the same here. Here such things are impossible. Alas, all the evil of the 20th century is possible everywhere on earth. Yet I have not given up hope that human beings and nations may be able, in spite of all, to learn from the experience of other people without having to live through it personally. I echo those words today. I hope that my kids don't have to live through this. We need to stand against evil doing. We need to stand against things that are untrue. We need to speak the truth. We need to discover what's happened in history. And maybe, just maybe, we can prevent socialism and communism from coming to the United States. That's it.